So this year for Halloween, I'm doing something a little bit different. I am going to create a swamp using fog and lasers. So it's a bit of a departure from what I usually do, which is more of the garage walkthrough maze with all of the different props like I've done in years past. So this year, none of the props are coming out. I am building a new prop that I'm going to display out front. I may put one scare in there at the end, but I'll tell you why you really can't have a lot of things going on when you're doing this swamp laser effect. Essentially it works by bouncing off of the fog and creating the illusion that you can't see below the laser line. And what I've seen, most of what I've seen is people use green lasers, which makes sense, green for kind of a swamp theme, you know, foliage or whatever. And I like that, but I also like the liquid sky effect. So what I did was I got blue lasers and green lasers. I'm going to create a swamp marsh effect at everyone's feet. And then if you look up, there's also going to be a liquid sky effect with blue lasers. And the reason you can't have other props that are putting off ambient light and things like that is the whole effect works when it's really dark and it's just the lasers that are on. If you have other ambient light coming through, or light from props and things like that, then you'll be able to see below that laser line. Now the point of that is it's going to create some mystery for sure. If you wanted to have the laser up really high and have an actor hide above that laser, or I'm sorry, below that laser line, then they could potentially, you know, jump up and scare people. So that would be something that you could do. You can also do a laser wall where an actor could come through the laser wall. I've experimented a little bit with that, and it seems pretty legit. You'd need it really dark for the effect to work well. What I did notice is that the laser itself actually puts off quite a bit of ambient light. So that laser will actually bounce off that fog, depending on how much fog you have, and cast light throughout your haunt. So you have to kind of experiment with it and see, you know, what will work best. I'm sure once I get black fabric up and everything like that, and will absorb some of that ambient light, the effect will be much better. But I first saw this at a Spirit Halloween store last year where they had a little haunted house set up, and it was just lasers, and then they had a speaker hidden and some sort of triggering device, and it actually caught me off guard. And I can't remember, it was like someone screaming or something, but it was very effective. So if you think about scary movies, it's not just the gore or the cinematography that makes a scary movie really scary. It's the music and the sound effects. So that's what I'm going to play off of for this year's haunt. So I don't think I included it in my video from last year's walkthrough of my haunted garage, but this was the layout that I had set up, and this will be the layout for this year. Just to explain what's going on here, in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see two red boxes with X's through them. That's my mill and my lathe. Too heavy, too big to move. That whole area will be covered in black cloth. The two black lines on either side of the garage also represent black cloth. The light shaded pink area is basically where we have all of our CrossFit equipment and some, you know, our refrigerator and some other stuff. I'm just going to leave that up this year and just cover everything with a clean black cloth along either side. In the middle, you see that white line. That is basically going to be a half wall that's suspended from a frame that I build, because it'll be open down below to allow the lasers from either side of the garage pass through. That way you get that whole swamp effect. So the first set of lasers will be 6 green laser lines, and you can see that they're positioned 3 on each side. And the reason for that is so if any one of the lines is broken, you can still have that laser effect continuing, and then that's a shot of where the liquid sky, the blue lasers, will be. So let's first talk about sound. Let me show you what I have going on here. So for my haunt, my plan is to use 2 sets of these Edifier speakers, and I will put a link down below. I looked high and low for the right speakers for this because I have a couple of different issues going on. First, I want ambient sound playing throughout the haunt, and I don't want it to be obvious where the sound's coming from. So the best way to do that is to have multiple speakers at a lower volume. If you just have the sound coming from one speaker, it's going to be pretty evident, and it's really going to take away from the effect of maybe disorienting you or making it feel like the sound really is all around you. So I knew I wanted 4 speakers, and instead of doing 4 speakers for ambient noise and then a separate 4 speakers for the scare sounds, which is a total of 8 speakers, which is a little much, I was trying to rack my brain on how I could actually pull this off with just 4 speakers and maybe 1 or 2 controllers. So ultimately this is what I decided on. 2 sets of these Edifier speakers and then 2 Boobox Flex show controllers. And first I'll talk about the speakers. So I like these speakers because the price point is pretty affordable. They sound extremely well. These are the same speakers that I used in my Monster in a Box prop reboot. They sound incredible. For the money, you just can't go wrong. But this is the best feature that I found that would work perfect for this application. They actually have 2 separate inputs. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be splitting the audio from one audio source into using just one of these audio splitters here into all 4 speakers, and that's going to play my ambient sound, and I'll just use like an MP3 player to accomplish that. Now the reason I can't use the Boobox Flex for that, even though they have an ambient sound, that sound cuts out when the scare sound plays. Now I believe it's the Flex Max. If you have the Flex Max, you can have a secondary input and mix that with volume control into your overall show, and you can dictate whether or not that plays with your scare sounds. Now remember, I want it to feel like you're in a swamp, so I want that ambient sound playing the whole time, and when a scare sound comes on, I don't want that ambient sound to go away. I want that scare sound to come out of one speaker only, because it's going to be directional and it's going to be more realistic. That's what's going to give you the big scare. It's going to seem like wherever that speaker is, I'll put it into a dark corner or whatever. It might seem like, okay, there's something over there. That's what I want to sort of play off of, that the scariness of that unknown, the darkness, and the sound. And the fact that you're not going to be able to see, you know, below your knees or whatever because of those green lasers. So this is essentially how it's going to work. I'll have an MP3 player that'll be playing the ambient sound. It'll go to all 4 speakers that'll be spaced at strategic locations in the garage. And I'll have 2 of these Boobox Flexes. And the nice thing about these is they have 2 inputs, and that's what I need. I need a total of 4 inputs. I'll probably use motion detectors at 4 locations in the garage. And on one of the inputs, it'll play one sound to one speaker, and on the other input it'll play one sound to the other speaker. How you accomplish that is you just use your left and right channels. It's not going to take away from the overall sound depending on how the sound is mixed. Just make sure you get a good quality sound. And then in the director software that you actually program your show into, you simply go to your input, you add the sound, and under scene settings you can change how much volume is left and how much volume is right. So I simply have one sound coming on the left channel, one sound coming on the right channel. So let me set this up real quick and I'll show you kind of how it works. And before anybody recommends that I use a BooTunes MP3 player, I really can't for this setup, because remember, I need 4 separate audio channels. I could only get 2 out of a BooTunes MP3 player, and they're about $140. So for about 40 bucks more, I could get a Boobox Flex that gives me 8 solid state outputs and an expansion port, and I still have the 2 inputs. So I just think that's a better value, and then I can reuse it for something completely different and actually control props with it. The other nice thing about these speakers is they have separate treble and bass control. There's also some pretty good sound controls within the director software. The Boobox Flex, your only option for audio out is just that that 1/8 inch stereo jack. And real quick on cables, because when I was looking at audio splitters, be very careful. If you get like a 4-way splitter for headphones, it might be a mono channel. That's not what you want. You need a stereo. So really understand the difference between a stereo plug and a mono plug. If you mistakenly order the wrong cables, you could be very frustrated and disappointed. And if you're going to do anything like this, I would recommend, you know, sort of hashing out like what cables and what speakers you're going to use and how you would accomplish that early on, because it can be frustrating if you don't quite understand, you know, how the sound is going to translate to your entire scene and you don't have the right controller. Naturally, you might be using something else. You could probably use an Adafruit. They have an MP3 player, the Adafruit MP3 player, with a bunch of different trigger settings. I used that on one of the props before, and I guess the sound quality is really good, so you can do that on the cheap if you wanted. Or if you want to go a little more high-tech like I am, I highly recommend these BooBox controllers. They're extremely reliable and a lot of fun to program. So essentially, I just have my phone. I'm going to play the ambient sound on my phone now. So that's the swamp ambient sound that I'll be playing. So the way I have this wired right now is, if you want to test your show, you can hit the play button, but it only plays what you have set up on input 1. The only way to play input 2 for test purposes is just to rig up a little like a push button controller, but I've just done that with wiring. So I'm going to play the first sound on scene 2 by using this little test switch that I set up. And that's coming out of this speaker here. Now I'm going to press the play. It's going to play it on input 1 on the other channel, which is just an owl. And that's coming on this speaker here. And one thing, when you're using sound effects, I noticed that you can actually get really good sound effects from YouTube. You can just rip the audio if you understand how to do that. Either hook in, you know, a digital recorder on your phone, your headphone output, or even better yet, get like a video ripper. Like iTube Studio is what I use. I'm a Mac guy, so I use iTube Studio. It does a very good job. I think they actually make it for Windows too. So that's how it is essentially going to work. I'm going to try to do the entire haunted house just with lasers and sound and just see how it comes out. Again, I may do some sort of pop-up prop at the very end. Doubtfully, I'll just kind of see once I get it set up. If I like everything, then I'll probably just keep it like that. I may build a little facade for one part of it, like a little swamp shack or cabin or something like that. I just have to see how much time I have. I have do a little bit of traveling for work, as always. I don't know why it always ends up in October, but it just is what it is. But let me show you some video of the lasers, which I know that's what everybody's been waiting for. You want to hear about the lasers. So I'll cut to some video of the lasers and I'll kind of explain where to buy them, what to do, what not to do, and all that jazz. So real quick on these lasers, there's something called MW, which stands for milliwatt. That is the power of the laser. There's something called NM, which stands for nanometer, and that is the color of the laser. So you can see from this, the Halloween supplier, a green laser would have cost me $75. I was able to find the exact same specs on Amazon for $32, so less than half the price. Now for the blue laser, I couldn't find it on Amazon, I could only find it on eBay, but for well under half the price, $38 compared to $95. The only difference was it was 20 less milliwatts, but they actually are pretty strong. I was very impressed with them. The key thing to remember is that nanometer number. You want to find something around 450. If you're closer to like 405, that's violet. They might bill it as blue violet. It's not blue, it's violet, and you'll be disappointed if you're looking for that really nice blue color. So I'm just playing around with the blue lasers here, and as sort of a proof of concept, I have 4 lasers set up. And the tricky part is actually lining them up so they intersect. You want them to intersect almost exactly if you can. They sort of come with these funky monopod things that you could actually mount to a piece of wood or on the floor, ceiling, whatever. They work okay. They just require a little bit of finessing. So I just placed a jug of fog fluid next to the laser, and opposite of this laser I'm setting up another laser and trying to intersect it exactly, or as close as I can anyway. So I'm wearing some white socks. So obviously there's no fog in the room yet. I just wanted to see what it looked like with me walking around and it being pretty dark. You could see how much light that laser actually reflects off of bright things. So my white legs and my white socks, you can see how a little bit off the lasers are where they intersect. And again, you want to use, they recommend 6 lasers, because if one of the beams is broken by someone walking in front of it, then you still have those other lasers, whether it's the 2 diagonals, if the middle one's blocked, to complete the effect. If you have one side of all of the lasers, if you only try to do this with like 2 lasers, if one side was blocked, then basically the effect would be gone. So I'm just running some fog through the room here just to see what it looks like. And this is bog fog through my Antari Ice 101. There's no ice in it. You can see there's no breeze, obviously. The garage door is closed. So the fog stays relatively close to the ground. So I'm just going to try to kick up some here and just get a sense for what that effect is like. So that is the plan for this year's Haunted Garage walkthrough. It's going to be a swamp theme with green lasers at knee level to create that swamp illusion, and those blue lasers up above for that liquid sky effect. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to see additional content, and of course I will post some follow-up videos, and I'm also working on a new prop.